Hey everybody, and welcome to Rocksmith Encore. Once again, we are back. My name is Dan Amrick. I'm your community developer. This is Brian Poedy. He is your luthier.
Hello.
If you have not been watching the earlier Rocksmith Encores, Rocksmith Encore is a chance for us to step out and do stuff that's a little bit different from the rest of our stream programming. And it's a little bit more free form, but in this case we've done something much more structured. This is part 3 of a 3-part series on the construction of your guitar, the upgrading of your guitar, and today, specifically, the setup of your guitar. Setting up your guitar is super important because you can make a bad guitar play better, or you may find that you have a great guitar that you thought was going to be amazing, and then just like a handful of tweaks have not been made, and you'll go, this guitar is a piece of crap. But if you know what you're doing, you can actually do this yourself. You can certainly take this to a licensed professional, someone like Brian Poedy, who, well, okay, I guess you don't have a license. Yeah, I don't think you have a license. But you can certainly do that and have a professional do this, or you might be surprised to find out how easy it is to do it yourself. And that's what Brian is here to tell you all about. We also have an extra person. Knowing that this is the kind of thing that you might have some questions about, please feel free to ask your questions as we go through. Honeypot01 is going to be in the chat room shortly. He's stepped out because we needed him to go get something really fast. But we also have Travis. Hi, Travis. Travis, do you have a cam? Is the Travis cam here? Travis Kindred is running our board. He will also... Hi,
Hello.
Travis. He will also be helping us field some of your questions, and he'll interrupt us as necessary as we go through. But we're in for about an hour, and again, if you miss any part of this, don't worry. This will be available as a stream on demand after the fact. You can always go back to this. This is supposed to be a long-term reference. So even though we may go through things at a blistering pace, know that you will always be able to go back and do more research on this and pause it and go through this at your own pace. But Brian, you're a fast technician. You have done a lot of work for this series. So first of all, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And
what-
thank you out there for tuning in.
What are you planning on doing today?
So I'm probably going into more than we would usually do in guitar setup. We're going to do some truss rod adjustment. We're going to set the action. We're going to do the intonation. The bridge needs a little balancing out because it's a 2-point tremolo now. So we're going to do all those things, which are pretty normal setup things.
Yeah.
But I also took it a step further, and we're going to put a new nut on the guitar, which is already there, and you'll see that happen in a minute. Because I wanted to put a higher quality nut on it, and they're only about $10. But I also went through and I leveled the frets, and I recrowned the frets.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you did some major stuff. This is the kind of work that will cost you anywhere between $35 if you've got a friend, up to about $100, depending on if you go to a fancy store. So this is good stuff to learn, but this is also kind of time-intensive stuff, and it takes a little bit of practice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair.
The leveling and crowning I did all ahead of time because I didn't think anyone would want to sit there and watch me do it in real time because it's reasonably labor intensive. So that's why we've got, you know, this leveling beam here, and this is a crowning file, which is a rounded file, and you'll see these
how these
in
are
the video.
Used.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've pre-recorded some of the longer, more the labor-intensive steps today.
I did. Yeah. So if we want to just jump into getting to work, we can roll that video.
Sure. Again, this is part 3. So in part 1, the guitar that we're still working with the same target instrument. This is a guitar that we had in the office. Not a particularly expensive guitar. The idea was, let's take something that you might have bought, you know, sort of like, I want to learn how to play guitar, but I don't want to spend a lot of money in case I don't stick with it. And then the good news is you're sticking with it and you love playing guitar, and the bad news is your guitar is not very good. What can you do short of buying a whole new guitar? Could you actually go through and upgrade the instrument? So step 1, he actually disassembled this and reassembled it live on the air. Step 2, we talked about changing out certain parts. So we've changed the tuners, and by we, I mean him. The tuners, the pickups, the bridge. Was there anything else that you
I think
you
it's
swapped out?
easier to talk about the things that are the same.
Yeah.
So there's the neck.
The neck and the body.
And there's the body.
And that's pretty much.
And there's the output jack.
Right.
And
Everything else
that's
has been swapped out.
Yeah.
So, but the bottom line is that if you don't do this last step, and you don't actually dial everything in, and some of this is going to be subjective, but if you don't dial this stuff in and make sure that the details are there, you won't get the benefit of all those previous steps. Right. So that's why, you know, and again, even if you have never wanted to upgrade your pickups or you've never wanted to make these kind of changes, this is the step that you can probably do on the guitar you already own, regardless of what it is, and hopefully will demystify some of that stuff.
Yeah, the parts are going to make it a little nicer to use, a little more stable, particularly tuning. This guitar didn't like to stay in tune very well, which is a big part of why we replaced the tuners in the bridge. But if you don't want to replace any parts at all, just doing a good setup is going to get you 80% of the way there to a much better playing instrument.
So what did you pre-record? I cut you off, sorry.
So what I pre-recorded was leveling, crowning, and polishing all the frets, and also cutting the new nut for the guitar, because that seemed like a lot to do live on the air.
Yeah. Okay, well then let's dive into that, and I assume that you can explain what the heck we're going to be seeing as we see it.
I will explain it.
Okay.
It's been explained.
Oh, is it pre-baked in?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so then we'll be back after this video, I suppose. All right, great. Then let's roll it.
Yep.
All right, so today we're going to be doing a lot of fretwork on this guitar. So the first thing to do is to get the neck completely level. So I'm adjusting the truss rod to do that. This neck had a lot of back bow in it, so it took a little bit of tweaking, but we got it there. So now I'm going to put some masking tape down along all the frets. I'm going to be making a pretty good amount of mess all over this guitar. So I want to tape up the fretboard, particularly since it's rosewood. It's nice and porous. It'll collect all those metal shavings if we don't do that. So the frets got too narrow for the tape. So pro tip, just cut your tape in half, and then you can get it nice and right against the fret edges all the way down the neck. And you don't have to worry about it actually overlapping the frets, because that's what we're working on, so we don't want it covering them up. Almost done. And the other thing you have to remember to do is cover up those pickups, otherwise any metal shavings will stick to them, especially when we start using some other stuff later. So now I'm marking all of the fret tops with marker. This will allow me to see what I've shaved down and what I've missed. This is my leveling beam. It's just a nice long chunk of metal that's been ground flat on two sides. So you can see I'm just going back and forth over all the frets, taking a look to see what I've hit and what I've missed. The fretwork on this guitar wasn't great. It took quite a bit of doing to get the frets, especially in the high positions on the lower strings, flat. They were really low compared to the rest. So now we're going to mark all the frets up again. Here's my fret file. And we're going to go in and recrown everything. So the process of leveling the frets, of course, makes the tops of all the frets really flat. And that's going to make your intonation awful, and it would feel weird to play. So after you go and level the frets, you have to go back through and recrown all of them and make all of those tops round again. This really chews up the sides of the frets. So you mark the top with the marker again, and then you go along with the file, and you file them all down until you just have a really thin line right on the top of the fret. Because you don't want to actually start carving down that top of the fret again, otherwise it won't be level with all the other frets that you just leveled. Take it slow and you just leave a nice thin line right on the top of the fret, which means you haven't touched that and it's good and level with everything else. Getting there. And about half of them now. Just taking a look at everything, making sure haven't gone too deep in any of these. Also, you have to kind of rock the file back and forth because the frets obviously are curved and the file is flat, so you have to make sure you get the entire radius of that fret, otherwise you're going to end up with some spots that are flat, which we don't want. Alright, so as I said, that file really chews up the frets. It takes a lot of material pretty fast, which is nice because it doesn't take too long, but it leaves a lot of work to be done afterwards. Now I've just got some real fine sandpaper, and I'm just going along and I'm polishing all of the cuts out of those frets so they'll feel nice and smooth under your fingers again. You can see as I'm working my way down the neck, the frets that have just been filed with the crowning file are really dull, and then as I go along with the sandpaper, it's starting to brighten them up a bit. They're getting nice and shiny again. So this is probably 1500 grit sandpaper. I'm really working on the sides of the frets. I want to get the sides more than the tops. I'll have to get the tops too, but it's the sides that the fret file, the crowning file, is really digging into. And again, I don't want to make my nice level frets not level. You got to get the tops a little bit, but mostly I'm working on the sides of the frets so that the crowns are nice and level. Then I went over everything with steel wool just to kind of polish it up a little more. Now we're peeling off all the masking tape, and you can really see all the gunk that was on the fretboard of this guitar. It was pretty dirty. It wasn't played that much, there wasn't that much fret wear, but the fretwork wasn't very good, which is why we're leveling and polishing all these frets. And the fingerboard had a lot of finger gunk on it. So using steel wool and cleaning that all off. I really hate steel wool. I think it's a terrible thing. You can see the mess it's making here. That's why we had to put the tape on the pickups, because that steel wool will stick to those pickups and it's awful. So if you've never strung up a guitar with locking tuners before, it's super easy. You just pull the string through, you turn the knob on the back, lock it down. Now I'm just checking the height of the frets, because what I'm doing here is I've stacked a bunch of feeler gauges so that they are the height of the frets plus about 20 thousandths of an inch. And this allows me to just go through with this nut file and just rough the nut in really quick. Otherwise, you have to be really careful not to go too deep, because if you go too deep into one of these nut slots, you're just going to be starting again. So this allows just a real kind of quick and dirty first pass to get those slots close to where they're going to have to be, and then we'll go back later and we'll clean it up. So of all the tools that I've used in all these videos, these are really the ones that you can't fake. You really need decent nut files to cut a nut correctly. You'll see people use needle files or various other files, but one of the problems with those is they tend to either be flat or triangular, and your guitar strings are neither of those shapes. Your guitar strings are round, so you need a file that's round on the bottom that's going to create a round slot, otherwise the string is going to sit in the slot in a really weird way, and it's not what you want. It's no good. And the string can rattle, the string can slip. These Hiroshima files are about 12 bucks a piece, but they do an amazing job. They're what I use on all the guitars that I do not work on. I wouldn't be without them. They're a little expensive, and it's a specialty tool. It's something you're probably not going to use a lot. So maybe this is one of those tasks that it's just worth having somebody else do. When you get to these narrow strings, the files get just razor thin. It's about the thickness of the string. That file was like 10 thousandths of an inch thick, so the file starts to want to bend, so you have to be really careful. Now I'm going back and I am making sure all these strings are at their final heights. So I kind of graduate the heights of the strings as I go down. So the E and A are 20 thousandths off of the first fret. The D and G are 18 thousandths, and then the B and the high E will be 16 thousandths of an inch off of the fret. So I'm using the feeler gauges, and this takes lots of trial and error. You want to go really slow. When you start getting really close, just 2 or 3 passes of the file through the nut too many, and the nut is too low and the strings will buzz. This part takes a lot of time, takes a lot of work. But if you do it right, the results are really good. You see me trying the feeler gauge a lot here. Kind of my trick is to pluck the string and then slide the feeler gauge along the fret under the string. And if it just touches the string, you can hear it. It'll start to vibrate against the feeler gauge, and that means it's just at the height I want. So now I'm moving on to the last couple of strings. We're just going to get those to their final depths of 16 thousandths. Use that high E again. You gotta be real careful with that file or it will bend, and then it does not want to pass through that nut slot anymore. And now I'm marking the heights of all the strings on the nut because the slots are really deep now and doesn't really allow the strings to vibrate as nicely as we would like in the nut. And it just kind of looks unsightly. Now I've got the nut in a vise and I'm just using a file, and we're going to file all this material off. Starting off with a really coarse file. It takes a real coarse cut. It doesn't look pretty, but it's fast, and we can get the bulk of the material that we want gone in a pretty short amount of time. Again, there's lots of trial fitments here to get the nut to the right width, especially the neck, because it comes oversized. Moved on to a finer file, and an even finer file still, and we're polishing all of those scratch marks out of the nut. And this will take a little more material with this second file, and third file, and fourth file. And now just polishing it up with some sandpaper, and we're almost there. This is just about ready to go in the guitar.
You move really fast.
I know.
Congratulations
right?
on being
it's
the world's quickest luthier. So, over the course of that, you crowned the frets. And you talked about like somebody had asked. I think it was Lunachick in our chat room. What do you want the frets to feel like when you're done? How do you know when they're right? Is it subjective?
I suppose everything
there is
is
an absolute perfect
to a point,
way.
but with fretwork, if they're rough, and this guitar was actually a really good example of what bad fretwork feels like, the string will actually drag on the fret as you move the string across the fret, and you want them to be kind of, glassy and smooth.
Right.
So the string moves really easily across the fret and not have any drag. And stainless steel frets are supposed to be really good for that. I actually don't like stainless steel frets.
Really? I haven't
They
tried one.
feel weird to me.
Most frets are nickel?
Yeah, like a nickel,
Or a nickel
alloy.
Alloy, yeah.
So your strings are actually harder than your frets. So that's why your strings wear your frets out.
As we have found, because occasionally we've had guitars get dropped on, if the guitar just tilts over and lands on its neck. We actually have a beautiful Gibson Nighthawk here in the office that has a split fret where the string just cuts straight through, and we need to basically replace the whole fret at some point. We haven't done it, unless you know some mojo to.
Well, I've loaned some guitars out, and they've come back with similar cuts.
Yes.
And I was able to just level and crown all the frets, but again, that's several hours of work, leveling and recrowning.
Right.
24 frets. It's not an easy thing. It looks like there is a question.
Travis has a question. Hi, Travis. First-time caller?
First-time caller, long-time listener.
Excellent.
Let's see. Beatmaster80 would like to know, at what point is polishing the frets not recommended anymore? Got a greater than 25-year-old Gibson SG, and some frets are very abused already with bigger dents.
Yes. I have. I saw serious wear on my late 70s Les Paul that I had for a long time, where you could physically, just visibly see it. frets don't last forever.
They
Is
don't.
there a minimum time at which you should just say, I should leave it as do you want to leave it as is rather than having it completely refret?
I was talking to Condescending Brendy, if you're out there, Brendan, about just this on Thursday.
Yeah.
Because his Strat has horrific fret wear, and he's really reluctant to get the frets replaced because, you know, he's like, oh, this guitar has this mojo and a certain feel, and I don't want to lose that. But at the same time, it kind of plays like garbage because it has such terrible fret wear.
Right.
Luckily, Brendan's a pretty accomplished musician, and he can play a garbage guitar and make it sound good. But if you don't want to play something that doesn't play well, there comes a point where you just have to replace the frets. There's no way around it if you like low action and a kind of slinky feeling guitar. I'm very notorious for wanting the guitar to basically play itself.
Right.
So for
Why
me,
do more work than you have to do?
Yeah, for me, having really good fretwork is really important, and that's why I learned to do all this stuff. 'Cause
Right.
I was like,
This
isn't
isn't good enough for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, this comes down to, do you consider your guitar a working tool or do you consider your guitar a vintage collectible? And some people will say, if all you see it as is a vintage collectible, then don't change anything ever, ever, ever. You know, but I'm in that camp, which is if they're too low for you to properly crown, then you have to face the reality and get it done. So if in doubt, crown your frets, dress your frets, clean your frets, do this step.
Yeah, and I mean,
if you find that it still doesn't play well, then you may need to take it in for a full refret, which is a delicate thing, and you know, and is not something to be entered into lightly. But
no, it's a lot of work, but the results can be really good.
Yeah.
If it is a vintage instrument that's important to you, before you do that, you know, maybe take it in and see what somebody who has experience with that sort of thing has to say if they think there's still life in the frets. Because if you're okay with your frets being really, really low, they might be able to polish and crown them, and you can get a few more years out of it.
Right. Now, for the nut, you replaced this with, this is a synthetic bone nut?
Yeah, this is a Graphtec Tusk nut, so it's Teflon impregnated. So guitars tend to stay in tune pretty well if they've got a tremolo with these nuts and locking tuners. I have these on several guitars. They're also really easy to work with because they're some sort of hard plastic, so they're really easy
Super
on your tools.
resin or something.
Yeah.
And then the files that you've got for this, these are not cheap files.
No, maybe we throw these up.
Maybe we do the closey bit.
This guy.
This was one of the things when we put this together. Poedy, well, I think tilt it backwards. There you go. This was one of the first things that I said, you know, what would you need? What tools do you need us to own here in the office for you to do this? And he said, oh, I really want these frets, and I really want these files. And these files turned out to be like $45 or something like that. I mean, or was it more? Was it a lot more?
They're like 110.
Okay, cool. We got a
for the
good
set
deal.
Of 10.
Wow.
Yeah, they're.
But again, that's an investment for tools that you will use for years. So don't, you know.
And there was actually a bit of talk on Twitter about files, and you know, oh, is there a cheap alternative? And my answer was no.
Yeah. Not if you want to do it right, not if it matters to you. And again, like, you know, something that kind of investment might not make sense if you only have one guitar and you just need it set up. Then it makes more sense to spend $100 or $112 or whatever to have somebody else just do everything that needs to be done on that guitar because that's your only guitar. But if you have 20 guitars or if you make your own guitars, then yeah, this makes much more sense.
Yeah, and these are good quality, and you know, they're not that expensive for what they are because they're a really precision tool.
Right.
Somebody was also asking about the crowning file. I don't know if we want to throw this guy up there too.
Oh, do you want to do that in the little the close-up
maybe
cam?
You can see
Oh, hi.
that this is curved. It's double-sided, so it's
Is one concave and one convex?
no, they're both concave. It's
they
for
are. Okay.
Wide frets on one file and on one side and medium on the other. Here.
How would you know how to use that?
Thank you, Stu Mac.
Which side do you use, wide or narrow? Are there specific different types of fret wire that you would know that's a wide fret versus that's a narrow fret?
Yeah, so this is wide and medium, and there are narrow
wide and medium,
frets,
sorry.
but you don't see them on that many production guitars. Fenders are going to tend to be more of a medium fret.
Okay.
And you know, Gibsons probably fall in that range too. It's when you get to like Ibanez and Jackson that you get the really super wide.
Those are wide.
Jumbo
Okay.
frets.
All right.
And, you know, usually in whatever literature there is, they'll tell you like, oh, these are super jumbo frets or medium
Right.
frets. Yeah.
All right. So, what's next, I suppose?
Well, now that we've done all that work to make the frets flat, we should probably adjust the truss rod here.
Okay, this is the scariest thing in the world. So the truss rod is actually a giant metal rod that runs through the length of the entire neck.
Right,
and
I
you
should have brought one in. I've got a bunch.
Oh, do you really? Oh, yeah, that would have
Yeah.
been great.
Oh, well, sorry.
Way to think of it now.
Yeah, I'm good at that.
This was, to me, this was the division point between stuff I feel comfortable doing myself and stuff I should never screw with. And it was through my friend Greg Philpott at Orbiter Guitars that I reached out to him and I said, I've got guitars that I want to get in better shape, but I would also like to learn how to do some of this stuff myself. He was not threatened by that, and I'm forever grateful. But that was one of the things that he walked me through. Was my first truss rod, and I was like, all I have is nightmares that if I'm going to twist the neck because I'm moving a giant metal shaft inside a piece of wood. I'm going to twist that too far or too fast or whatever, and it's going to break. Like it's going to splinter the wood, or it's going to twist the fretboard so that it's actually at an angle. How likely is that to happen?
Not very.
Okay, good. I already feel more empowered.
You'd have to try really hard.
I can.
Do you want to see if you can break?
No, I do not want to see if I can break this. Travis has a question. I see. So we go to the Travis.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, Travis.
Travis.
Back. We have a quick question coming in from Marcus Coble. What are those jumbo frets, and what's the difference to other frets?
Oh yeah. So jumbo frets is something, or I hear that a lot too.
Right. So there's two important measurements in a fret. One is the height of the fret. The other is the width of the fret. So a jumbo fret is usually going to be quite wide and quite tall. I think the really tall, like Dunlop 1600 kind of, like super shreddy heavy metal fret, are like a little over 1/10 of an inch tall.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That is a significant. The good news is that as you slowly over the years shave that down and recrown it,
Right.
you've still got plenty of material to work with.
There's a lot more meat in those, so they will last longer in that sense because you can work on them more over time. So you're less likely to have to refret the guitar when you have a really big fret like that.
Okay. Yeah. Travis has another question from our viewers.
Cool. One more quick question before you guys move on to the next bit. Can you explain why you would adjust the truss rod after leveling the frets? Is there any risk of having undone any of the fret filing that you've been doing so far? This is from Oats00.
That's a good question. So you're going to have to adjust the truss rod once you put strings on it. So I adjusted the truss rod to get the fretboard really level before I leveled the frets, but then once you put strings on it, you're putting tension against the neck, and you're going to bow the neck from the tension of the strings.
Natural. A certain amount of bow is to be expected.
Yeah,
Because
the neck is
nature
going to
of-
move.
Yeah.
There's
It's still wood.
Yeah, maybe if it was made of steel, it wouldn't move, but since
Carbon
it's not,
fiber.
it's going to move. Yeah, people put the carbon fiber rods in and stiffen them up, but this does not have that.
No, not
This is
at this price
$150
point. It does
guitar.
not. Yeah.
So basically what we're going to do now is we're going to undo that bow that the string tension put in the neck.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think we can go to the close-up cam again, and maybe people can see what I'm doing here.
Oh yeah, look at that.
So Dan has this handy little tool.
Yeah, I have all the tools and the toys, but none of the knowledge on how to use them. But this is a little doohickey that I got on Amazon, which is a stainless steel string gauge straight edge. So it's got, the reflections are kind of funky, but it's got very, very small measurements in millimeters, and so that you can see exactly how far away the string is from the fret. That's what you want to measure at this point when you start talking about truss rod, and action in general is the word used for this.
Yeah. So where I tend to measure is right at the 7th fret, because that's actually about the halfway point of the neck. Obviously, the 12th fret is the halfway point of the entire scale of the instrument, but we're not moving the neck in relation to the entire instrument. We're only moving the neck in relation to itself. So the 7th fret is about the center. You can use a tool like this to tell you exactly what the height is from the frets to the bottom of the string.
Where do you look? At the bottom of the string or the top of the string?
The bottom of the string.
Okay.
The top of the string doesn't matter.
Okay, that's true. Logic would have told me that, but that's just one of the things that I always like. I don't know how to use a ruler, you know? It's kind of ridiculous.
So what matters is the top of the fret to the bottom of the string. I've seen people talk about, if you put thicker strings on, it's going to change your action. It's like, not really.
No, because the bottom of the string is always going to be relative
the bottom of
to
the string
fret.
is what rests in the nut.
So you're
and at the
really
bridge.
just measuring the space between where the string begins and the fret begins.
Mm-hmm. So I don't actually use any tools generally to do this.
Because you're a Jedi and you use the Force.
I do it by eye. So if I pull this back, you can probably see. If you hold it down at the first fret and the last fret, and then some people use a capo at the first fret because they're smart and they actually use tools to their advantage.
I can hold it if you want.
I have another finger though.
Okay.
So I can see that there's a lot of movement between the string and that 7th fret, and I want it to be really, really close. I like the neck to be extremely straight because I want the instrument to play itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn this, and I'm not going to turn it that much.
Okay, so he's got an Allen wrench, a hex wrench, and he's shoved it in the end of the neck, and that's the end of the truss rod. You will sometimes your guitar will have a little plastic cover over this. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes it's for vanity. Sometimes it's for branding.
Yeah, I tend to take them off, but
yeah,
it's still on my Les Paul because they look good.
The trick is to go slow with the truss rod. Do not make any sudden movements. You will get resistance, especially if it's the first time that you've moved the truss rod since you got the guitar. It's going to be rough. It may even make a clicking sound when you finally get it to move. That's the nature of having a big thing of metal in the middle of a plank of wood.
Yeah, it should turn fairly smoothly. There is resistance against it, but I'm not having to lean into it.
Right, you're doing this pretty, but as it is, you've maybe moved this a quarter of a turn total, maybe a little bit more than a quarter of a turn.
Right, so I'm kind of limited by how much space I have between these strings.
But that's good because it will also stop you naturally from overdoing this step.
Yeah, I won't do anything stupid, which is great.
So the goal is to get the string to be as close to the fret as possible. Now that you know that your frets are pretty much even or evener than they were.
Right, that's my goal. So
lower action makes for an easier playing guitar. Some rhythm guitarists like really high action.
Right, and like bluegrass guys,
sure,
like a lot of relief in the neck. That's kind of part of their style because they do a lot of playing below the 5th fret, and then all the other frets kind of fall away because the neck bows up this direction.
Right.
So it feels fine down here, but if you were to try to play up here, it would just be unplayable.
Right.
And I like the entire guitar to work as well as it can. So
I'm a big fan of pretty much straight next to. You'll see interviews with any given guitar hero that you care about, and they will have a preference. Eric Johnson, I think, is one of the people that likes really flat boards. Yeah, Travis, you have a question from our crew, unless it's your question. I don't know.
No. This is another a question from our beloved gallery of fans. When we're working over here, we're wondering why aren't we using a neck cradle or any kind of soft surface to work on for this particular guitar? This is Burn 121.
Yes.
Because if I do that while I'm trying to adjust the truss rod, it's putting tension on the neck and it's bowing it.
But normally, if you want to do all this stuff, neck cradle is a good idea. There's lots of different designs. We happen to have a collapsible one that I keep in my kit here.
Right. This is a pretty soft table. It's not.
Yeah.
I think the guitar is going to do more damage to this table than the table is going to do to the guitar, quite honestly.
In this case. If you're just joining us, by the way, this is Rocksmith Encore. My name is Dan Amrick. I'm the community developer for the title. And this is Brian Poedy. He is in addition to our note trackers who creates the DLC for the game, he has generously decided to explain how to rebuild and optimize your guitar over a 3-part series. So this is part 3. We're getting into the setup, the nitty-gritty of making your guitar play as efficiently as possible, or as Poedy likes to put it, I want the guitar to play itself. You will find that you can make some small tweaks to your guitar that will greatly increase the playability and make you feel like your guitar is worth a lot more, and it's just a joy to play a properly set up guitar. But it is something you have to learn. And it can be expensive if you don't learn it, but it can be pretty cheap if you do learn it, because then you can work on all of your guitars yourself. And that's what Poedy's kind of given us the skinny on what to do. He has already crowned and leveled the frets, and now we're getting into adjusting the truss rod to adjust the action, which is the space between the string and your fretboard, so that you don't have to press very hard at all in order to get the notes to ring out.
Right. So it was about 70 thousandths when we got started, and I will admit I made it particularly bad before we came up
So
here.
you would okay. I was
Yeah,
I was wondering. I was like, holy
exaggerated
cow!
it.
Why would you leave it like that? You wanted the drama of live TV.
Yeah, so now we're closer to 20 thousandths of an inch, which that looks good to me. It's just there's barely any daylight between the string and the fret when
Now-
you fret it at the first fret and the end of the fretboard. So that's probably pretty good.
You've been using this small ruler that shows you the string action and everything, but then you've got the feeler gauges too. Do you want to talk about the feeler gauges? Because you used them while we were answering another question.
I mostly use these for the nut. I did take them out just to see. A lot of people will try to set the height between the string and the fret to a very specific number.
Okay.
As I mentioned, I tend to just do it by eye. I
Right.
know what I want. A lot of people shoot for like 10 or 11 thousandths of an inch.
Okay.
To me, that's actually a lot.
Oh wow. Okay. So all these little thin strips of metal have specific sizes stamped on them, and the idea is that you would slip them between the nut and the fret, and when you get the one that gives you resistance, what is it? One below that is what your actual distance is. I mean, and again, this helps if you know what distance you want,
Right.
or what your goal is.
There's actually like a website on the internet that tells you all these like famous people and exactly how their guitars are set up. Who knows how accurate that information is, but it exists.
All right.
I've found through trial and error what I like, and like I said, I tend to just eyeball it because I know that I just want the neck basically dead flat.
Is there
I think Jeff Beck's another guy.
is there an all-purpose setting for how far away you would want the string to be?
No.
Is there a good starting place? Because if you're just starting this, then you don't know where to go with that.
Yeah, I honestly I don't use these for this process.
Okay.
I just look for daylight. Just a little bit of daylight between the string and
Okay,
the
so
top
you
of the fret.
just you go as low as you can. Here's my other question then, because you've been working with the truss rod, but I tend to not want to mess with the truss rod. I want to go to the saddles on the bridge and lower them, and you haven't done any of that.
I haven't because so if the neck is bowed
Right.
and you adjust your saddles way down to get the action where you want it, say here and here,
Right.
but the middle of the neck is
Scoops
lower,
away, right.
then when you play these frets, they're going to buzz on these higher frets.
Right.
So for me, the base of all your setup is going to be getting the truss rod where you want it.
Okay. So truss rod frets first, leveled frets first, truss rod second, fine tuning on the bridge.
Right, and you're not necessarily going to have to level all your frets to make the guitar play good. There's plenty of cheap guitars downstairs that actually have really good fretwork. This guitar just had particularly bad fretwork.
Made it a good victim for
Yeah.
this
So
experiment.
I figured, hey, let's go ahead and do the frets. So the next thing I want to do, if we can get another shot of this guy from the close-up, the bridge has a little bit of tilt forward in it. It's tilted this way. And
Okay.
I want it to be a little flatter against the guitar so it sits within the same plane as the body.
Right.
So to do that,
This is the famous floating tremolo system. So we've talked about this on previous shows, where you can adjust the resistance of your bridge and how much it floats, or if it just sticks to the, flattens out on the body based on where you put this, how many springs you put on, where you put them, and
if you're clever, you can take out the
yeah,
tremolo
you
bar.
should probably take out the bar, and how tightly you screw this claw into the back of the body.
Right. So if we tighten this just a tiny bit, there's not that far to go.
Right. You can put as many as 5 springs on here if you really just don't want it to move. I prefer a hardtail guitar. I don't really like to have a floating trem. It doesn't match my playing style. It's totally up to you. But rather than shove a piece of wood in there, and we talked about this a little bit last time, people had a lot of questions about how to properly block a tremolo, which is a term you may have heard, and that means physically putting a piece of wood in between the back of the bridge and the guitar body itself. You don't have to do that. You're going to get maybe a little bit more resonance, but probably not a huge amount, especially if you're dealing with a budget guitar. You can simply put more springs on the back, and that will keep the bridge close to the body, so-called decking it, rather than blocking it. You just sort of slap it down so that it hits the deck, and that's kind of how it works.
So having done that, the whole guitar is probably horribly out of tune now.
Yeah, probably. Let's make sure this is at, there we go, maximum brightness. Oh, there we go. We'll do it that way. Okay, so what I've got here is, oh, yeah, we'll get it into frame even. What I've got here is a, let's flip it around. There we go. This is an iPad app. Like, you have a lot of different things that you can do in order to... What's the matter? Is it upside down now? Yes. Damn it. You have all kinds of... Oh, I see. Oh, sorry. I thought the camera was oriented the other way. I'm dumb. You have all kinds of different things that you can use to tune your guitar. This just happens to be my personal favorite thing. Peterson is a company that makes super hyper accurate instrument tuners, strobing tuners. So the idea is that you see 4 columns here. Each of those columns will spin at different speeds depending on how out of tune it is. If you get all 4 columns to line up pretty much not moving much at all, and again, it's very hard to get it exact, but that's how this particular tuner works. We're using it here because obviously it's pretty high visibility. It's the biggest possible screen on a tuner we could reasonably provide for this example. You can use clip-on tuners, you can use pedal tuners, you can use the tuner in Rocksmith. But this, if you're doing precision work where you're really trying to dial in very little things about your guitar, this is one option. And this is just an iPad version where we're plugging the guitar directly in through an iRig 2 to get the signal. If you've got an acoustic, this will also use the internal mic. You can also get external strobe tuners. Peterson makes a really good basic, I think it's called the Strobe HD, that we use sometimes in the office too. Travis has another question, hopefully from our viewers. What do you got going on there, Trav?
Unfortunately, this question is more a comment from me.
All
as
right,
a musician.
that's totally fine.
So one thing you'll notice about the strobe tuner as we use it, there it is you'll see that you've got the sort of on the left, you've got large blocks, and they go like dark, light, right? And then right next to it, you have twice as many.
Right.
Dark, light, and then half as many and half as many. Those are in part to represent the sine wave. Right, which is cool because it's big wave, and then it's cut into 2 waves, and that's also following the harmonic series. So you have like first fundamental, and then the overtone above, and then the overtone above that, and the overtone above that, and that's what's really cool is it's tuning those overtones. That's why they're all moving slightly independently.
That sounds familiar. It's almost like what Brian Adam McCune was talking about on the first episode of Rocksmith Encore. If you would like to know more, if what Travis just said doesn't make sense to you, it will if you watch the very first episode of Rocksmith Encore. Brian McCune goes over the physics of sound, the anatomy of sound, why things sound the way they do, and honestly how music works. And that's a really good thing to point out because this does mimic how sound waves actually work. And Brian will explain more about how sound waves work in his Encore if you go back and take a peek after we're done here.
So let's kind of keep on that same topic and adjust the intonation.
Okay, the intonation. This is something that is something of a black art, and people we talk about this a lot because this can really affect your Rocksmith setup, particularly. A lot of times, people will say, "Your game's not reading my tones correctly. I'm in tune. Your tuner says I'm in tune." But when I play the 13th fret, the game thinks that I'm playing the 14th fret. Fix your game. This is pretty much a classic example of bad intonation, which is every fret has to be consistent all the way up. And if your intonation is off, then if you fret one fret, it might sound like the fret on either side. This is a very common problem, especially with cheaper guitars. But it's also one of the easiest ones to fix. If you tweak nothing else at the end of this show, check your intonation on your guitar. You would be amazed. All you need is a small hex wrench and or a Phillips head screwdriver, and that's it.
I'm using a flathead.
You're using a flathead because you're a crazy man.
And there's not really anything to break adjusting the intonation on your guitar. So maybe a good place to start because you're not going to destroy it.
So again, the idea is that the notes be consistent all the way up the neck.
Yeah. And
more or less.
Honestly, a fretted instrument is never going to be in tune everywhere. It's just not possible because of physics unless you have those crazy wavy frets, but not a lot of us do.
We're not going to get into the crazy wavy frets.
So if you look at like old lutes that had gut frets, you could actually move the gut frets because if people were playing in different keys, they would actually move their frets to sound better in those keys.
So a sweetened sort of fret layout. That's weird.
We can't do that here, so we're going to get it as close as possible. So right now, this tuner is extremely picky.
Yeah.
I'm going to say the B is pretty darn close at the open string, and then it's a little bit flat.
So
at the 12th fret.
The first and easiest check for intonation is fret the string, pluck the string open, and then fret it a full octave up on the 12th fret, the one with the two dots, and hit it again. It should sound exactly an octave apart. It shouldn't sound a little sharp. It shouldn't sound a little flat when you play it on that fretted 12th fret. If it does, then you know that your intonation is slightly off, and this is where you would make that adjustment.
Right. So since it's flat at the 12th fret, what that means is the string is actually slightly too long.
Okay.
If the string is sharp, then the string is too short. If it's flat, it's too long. So what we're going to do, since it's a little bit flat, is we're going to move the saddle just a hair, because it's pretty close in this case, but just a tiny bit in. So we're actually going to loosen the screw on the back, and that's going to allow it to move just a tiny bit, and then we have to retune it.
And again, this is something that will drive you crazy when you first learn to do it, because you've got to figure out exactly where that pitch is. A hyper-accurate tuner will help. Look at that. The columns are basically not moving. They're moving just a tiny little bit. In fact, it's picking up my voice more than anything.
So that's really good. That one's really close. Let's see how the E is. I already did the lower four strings before we came up here because this process is the same for every string. And I didn't think everyone would want to see me do it 6 times. So this one's a little sharp as well. So we want this to come towards the neck again. So I'm going to attempt to loosen this one as well. Unfortunately...
What do you need?
Can we go to the GoPro? So the saddle is pretty much hard against this post. So I don't know how much movement we're going to get. We might get a tiny bit. It might get close enough.
This is part of that. You can never get it 100% perfect. Don't expect to. That you were talking about, because sometimes your guitar is already built to certain limitations.
Yeah, and you could change the gauge of your strings.
Well, you put 9s on this, right? As illustrated by the pink pack of Ernie Ball Super Slinkies.
Mostly 9s on this?
Mostly. I mean, you can do hybrid sets, and they sell hybrid sets, and you can do whatever works best for you.
The strings on this are, I think, 9, 11, 16, 26, 36, 48, something like that.
Okay, so you went sort of... there is a Slinky gauge for that. I'm not
Hey,
I
we
forget
did
what
it.
it is. Look at that. It's not moving on the tuner, on the hyper-accurate tuner. And all you did was just move it a tiny little bit.
Right. So if you just want to see how it works, you can move the saddle a lot and you can be like, wow, it's really out of tune now. But unless something went really wrong at the factory, your intonation's probably pretty close and you'll only have to move it a little bit. I don't think I moved any of these saddles more than maybe half a turn, 3/4 of a turn.
Really?
At the most, from out of the box to properly intonated.
Honestly, some of my guitars have been pretty far out, and I needed to do 2 and 3 turns because I was horrified when it's like super sharp there. Again, this isn't something that most guitars will need on a regular basis. This is kind of a set it and forget it, but particularly if you're dealing with a low-quality guitar or if you've just done a lot of dramatic changes to your guitar, like replacing everything except the body, the jack, and the neck, if you've just done a fret job, if you've just, changed the pickups and all kinds of that stuff.
The big thing is if you change your string gauge.
Right.
You have to adjust
That's
your
true.
intonation.
So do you have to do anything else when you change your string gauge? For instance, I've always played 10s. Full confession, when I started out, I thought that the lighter strings were for beginner players. So I started playing on 8s. Then I felt I could graduate to 9s. And then I would move up to 10s. And then 10s I kind of felt comfortable until one day I realized, gee, I'm playing a lot of rhythm and I wanted to try a heavier gauge because I like to strum hard. So I went to 11s. And I was always afraid that the jump between 10s and 11s would mean I have to completely redo the entire setup of the whole guitar. And I found out that's not really the case. I really just have to tweak 1 or 2 little things, maybe a little truss rod, because there's significantly more tension on the neck at that point.
So for me, the only thing I would be likely to adjust is the truss rod, because your string is at the same height here, your string is at the same height here.
Right.
But what has happened is you've put more tension on the neck, so the neck has bowed up.
Like
this has moved this way, which is going to make the strings higher across the entire fretboard.
So just a little truss rod tweak to try to flatten that out a bit more.
Yeah, and honestly, I will see bigger movements with changes in weather than changing
that is a
one
really
gauge.
good. That is a really good point. This is wood. Wood is porous. Wood responds to humidity like you wouldn't believe. Classic thing growing up on the East Coast, I'd bring my guitar to a party and I'd be like, yeah, it's out in the garage. It's out in my car. It's in my trunk. It's literally 40 degrees colder out there. And then I bring it in, and why won't this stay in tune? Because it's constantly acclimating to that new temperature.
And that's how you get checking in your paint, too.
Yeah, which is cool if you want it, but
yeah,
guitar, I don't want that.
Guitar in the trunk of the car, it's really cold outside. You bring it into the house where it's 70 degrees, and you open up the case, and suddenly the paint just goes...
Yeah, and you get this crackle thing. Travis, you have a question for us. Hi, Travis.
Hello. I have 2 very quick questions.
Sure.
Let's see.
We will give very long answers because that's what we do.
Excellent. If you have a 24-fret instrument, would you also check the 24th fret harmonic as opposed to only checking the 12th harmonic for intonations? And this is from Justin Aiken.
You could. I don't. I don't have a good reason why you would or wouldn't, to be perfectly honest. It's just not part of my process.
Do it if you want, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, you can check the 5th and 7th, too. The problem is the whole thing's never going to really be perfectly in tune with itself because the frets are straight.
Right.
And that's not really the way pitches work.
So, I mean, if you do it at the 12th and then you do it again at the 24th, which one should take priority?
You could come up with a compromise.
Okay.
I would probably use the 12th as your priority because you're not playing up here.
That's true.
Unless you...
That's true. Right. Yes, and Travis, you said you had a second question from somebody in the audience.
Yes. The second one is, what do you do if you're intonating your guitar and you've taken the intonation screws in the saddle and you've screwed them all the way back and the saddles can't go anymore? Is there a quick check you can do to sort of go through that roadblock?
Is this Al?
I know he was having that problem. Has asked it, but also John LR 2000.
Okay.
So
if it's a tremolo like this that has springs and the spring is fully compressed, you can actually take the spring out, and that'll give you a little more room. Probably not a lot, but maybe enough to solve the problem. Jamie, when Jamie was working here,
Yes.
he had this problem on his guitar, and he ended up plugging all the holes and moving the bridge back.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there is a chance that if you're in that situation that maybe the guitar was simply built wrong?
Yeah, or...
Again, I mean, a lot of this will depend on the quality of the instrument you're starting with.
Right.
Or the skill of the person who built it. You would never make such a mistake.
His guitar was obviously modified.
Right.
Like, it had like 3 different bridges on it over the years. You could tell just by looking at it.
Yeah.
So somebody had just put the bridge a little too far forward. My first thing would be try pulling the spring out.
Okay.
If that doesn't work, again, changing your string gauge can help. There's really one more thing to do, and that is adjusting the height of the strings to the frets, if I can find the right size Allen key.
Okay, these are the 2 little Allen screws that hold up the bridge. They're like 2 little feet.
Right.
And the string goes in the middle over the bridge, but then there's 2 small adjustable screws, really tiny adjustable screws. And there's a good chance that your guitar came with a very tiny Allen wrench, and it's gauged to this size.
Yeah. So on this guitar, there's actually 2 places that you can adjust the string height. There is these that we were just talking about, the individual saddles.
Right.
And then you can also adjust the entire bridge up and down because this is a 2-point bridge with these larger screws.
Okay.
So what you can do is you can set the radius to the proper radius if you have the right tool. I do not have that at hand.
Oh, sorry, I could have brought in a radius gauge because, of course, I have all the toys.
That would have been nice.
Yeah.
We don't have that. So I'm going to kind of show my trick because there's a very specific measurement that I like to use to set my action, and it happens to be the width
of this
of
pick.
the picks that I use.
So this is an 88 millimeter, a 0.88 millimeter pick, the green Dunlop style. I've used this too. You mentioned you don't use feeler gauges.
So
oh, look, it dropped out.
Yeah, it dropped out, so that's where I want it.
You want it just about there.
Yeah, just to the point that the pick won't stay in. So, yeah.
Okay. That's pretty clever. I've seen other people do that, and I really like it.
So
because it's obviously something, A, arbitrary and subjective that is about your preference, and B, you probably have picks of different widths lying around your house. So
they're almost all that, actually.
Yeah.
Because that's what I like. But, yeah, it's handy. You
Right.
know, it gives you something that you know and you can recreate on any instrument. You could use feeler gauges. The problem is none of these are actually thick enough.
Right. These are really, really thin.
You'd have to use 2. I mean, these are great for setting the valves in your engine.
Yeah, that's the other thing is you will find if you want feeler gauges, you may find them in the automotive section
Yeah.
of Amazon rather than the musical instrument section. of
Yeah, or
Amazon.
your local auto parts store should have these.
So if you want to get the tools, speaking of that, if you want to get the tools for doing a setup, where do you recommend getting these tools? You've got files, you've got fret files, the crowning file. We've got these little like multi tools, all kinds of crazy stuff. Where do you go?
So the feeler gauges and something like this. Is this actually a bike tool? Or is
No.
this specifically for
That
guitars?
is specifically that's a Cruise Tools
Okay.
Git tool or something like that.
So
And I just really liked it, so I got one for the office.
pretty much any set of metric wrenches. So this has 1.5, 2.5, 3 millimeter, 4 millimeter, 1/8, 3/16, 1, 2, and 2.5 millimeter. It looks like.
I don't know. Your eyesight's better than mine.
Just any multi-tool is probably going to cover the bulk of this. Or if you just get a set of Allen wrenches, like a larger set, that's going to cover everything you need. Your guitar probably also came with the tools you need.
I keep a little sort of parts box at home, and every time that I find another Allen wrench that has gone missing, I just put it in the same thing. And then when it's time to work on stuff, I just keep going until I find the one that fits. And I go, oh, this must have been the one that came with the ESP, or this is the one that came with the Fender.
Feeler gauges are really handy to have because they tell you all of those really tight measurements.
Right.
Like Dan said, the automotive section of Amazon or your local auto store. This isn't something you're probably going to find at a guitar store. If you do find it at a guitar store, it's probably going to be 4 times what you would pay for it.
Yeah.
At an auto
I mean,
parts
honestly,
store.
I got the Cruise Tools thing at Amazon. I got this at Amazon. I got the little the stainless steel measure, the ruler. The flip side has super fine millimeter stuff too.
Yeah,
I got that at
64ths of an
Amazon.
inch is what.
We've talked about Stu Mac in the past.
Right.
StuMac.com. Stuart McDonald is sort of the one-stop shop for most people for serious luthier tools. I mean, this is everything from the common stuff like rulers and hex wrenches on into like hardcore woodworking tools.
Yeah, they sell everything guitar related, and their tools are really high quality. And you're going to pay for a high-quality tool.
That is the other thing that you should keep in mind. Like, if you look at Stu Mac, it's like, oh, my God, that's expensive. Yeah, but it's a very specific, high-quality thing that does that one thing, and it's the kind of thing that you generally don't want to screw up by trying to cheap out by another 10 or $15. So, keep that in mind.
If it's something you need specifically for the guitar, like a crowning file, you're not going to find this at AutoZone.
Right.
You know, you're probably not even going to find it on Amazon. You're going to find it at a specialty guitar shop. LMI, Luthier Mercantile International, is the other big vendor for guitar-specific tools, and they also sell really nice stuff, and they are comparably priced to StuMac. These fret files, though, we did get on Amazon.
We did, yeah, because you just sent me a link. You're like, I need all the following things. I'm like, okay.
And this is a set of 8 between a 10-gauge and a 50-gauge string. So I actually use bigger low E's than that, but these would probably work for a lot of people.
Sure.
You can also find these on eBay. I actually bought my set on eBay. If you know the gauge of strings that you like, and you just want to get those files, there's sellers on eBay who will just sell you a set of
individual, like this
6.
is, so you use 11s, here's your 11 gauge for building that nut. Okay.
So that's another good place to get these. I can't recommend these highly enough. These are an excellent tool.
What about a place as simple as Guitar Center, your local guitar store, your or even Musician's Friend online, which is Guitar Center's sort of web partner? How much of this stuff are they going to have? They're going to have the common stuff like
for
these
basic
multi-tools.
Setup, they're probably going to have most of the things you need. I'm sure you could get something like like this guy.
But you're probably not going to find the files.
No, that's a luthier tool rather than a guitar store kind of thing.
And then this, guitarpartcenter.com is what this fret leveler says. So that's,
So this was one of those things where I was looking at what they had at StuMac, and I really didn't want to pay what they wanted for it. I'm sure what they have is extremely good, but I was able to find something a little cheaper. All it is a steel beam that's ground flat.
Right.
If
you can do that yourself, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. If you're a machinist, you should just do this.
Sure.
Because you're probably going to do a better job if you've got the tools.
And in fact, you might find, maker spaces are more and more popular. If you're in a heavily populated area, you might find hobbyists who work with metal who would be willing to help you build some of these tools. If you really want to get hyper DIY and be like, I have a bespoke fret leveler, you may be able to find that somebody else is going to have fun building that with you or for you for a reduced price because, you don't have to go through all that stuff.
The really cool hack for the fret leveling beam is actually Corian. Because those countertop guys are obsessive about getting things extremely flat.
Wow.
So if you go to a shop that makes countertops, and usually it's Corian that I've seen people use, and they just have some cast-offs, they'll have some really nice, very stiff, very flat pieces that they might just give you.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's worth checking, or, it'll be a couple bucks.
Right.
Because it's just garbage to them.
Right, it's garbage to them, but it's gold to you.
Yeah. And then it's just double-sided tape and sandpaper stuck down to it.
Anything else? Are there any other questions that are out there lingering that we can answer? Because if not, we have other opportunities. If you think of something, or if you're watching this as a replay and you have questions, you can go into our forums at rocksmith.com. Poedy has been holding court, and we've been answering questions as they come through. We'll certainly go through and take a look at the notes from this stream and see if there's stuff that we missed or that we can clarify or answer in addition. But is there anything else, Travis? Is there anything worth talking about? Or is there anything else that you want to add, Mr. Poedy?
I've got one quick question.
Sure.
Coming in from Aaron66. How would you do the intonation on a Gibson Les Paul?
That's a really good question.
Well, we don't have one.
We don't have one here.
So Les Paul has the Tunematic bridge,
Right.
which has 6 saddles. They're held in by a screw. If it is an ABR1, the vintage style, the screw will be in the front. If it is a Nashville bridge, the screw will be in the back, and it's a very similar process to this. You just get in there and you either tighten or loosen the screw, and it moves the saddle forward or back.
And that one, it's it's very visible, even though this is small. Like the other thing we didn't mention is you should you loosen your strings when you make these changes?
That's a fair question. Some people loosen the strings before they adjust the truss rod in particular. I don't, because then I just have to retune the guitar.
This is what I didn't like about
again.
changing my truss rod, is that I felt like I needed to slack the strings anytime I made anything. It was just, it was just such a pain in the butt.
A lot of people do, but I want to know where the neck sits with string tension on it, and the guitar didn't blow up.
But yeah, the physics of the string and where it sits on the saddle and the saddle's relationship to the nut is the same on both Fender-style and Gibson-style bridges. And, of course, you will find some the hybrid bridges out there from other manufacturers or third-party folks that may make it easier. Travis has another question, too.
Yeah, this will be probably our last question from the gallery. What about pickup height?
Yeah, what about pickup height? This is another like last-minute tweaky thing, and we actually have a video out there from Travis, or not Travis, from Taylor Benson and David Stevens talking about making sure that your pickup is the right height for Rocksmith specifically. You know, what is the mojo with pickup height? Because even here, this one's up a little bit, this one's flat, this one's really high.
Right. So to me, it's very subjective.
You're of no use, Poedy.
It's a setup thing. Is what sounds good to you. So the higher your string is to the pickups, there's knobs in the way.
There are knobs in the way. I've got a solution to that.
The higher your pickups are, the louder they're going to be. But when they're closer to the string, they also are
they're pulling more.
They are pulling on the strings more with magnets. Because the strings have steel in them, which is how the guitar makes noise at all. There are specific values that manufacturers will give you that say this is a good starting point. So, you know, if you want to run with those, you can totally run with those.
Is there any way to do it wrong?
Yes.
Okay.
If the strings touch the pickups, obviously they're too high.
Okay.
But also, if you get the pickup too close to the string, you're going to kill the sustain, especially if it's the neck pickup, because the string moves more here.
Sure.
The bridge pickup can be a little higher, I feel, because the string doesn't move as much.
Okay.
But if the neck pickup gets too close to the strings, you're going to get a lot less sustain. If your pickups are too low, your guitar is going to be really quiet. So it's all about balancing your volume and your sustain. So that's why, to me, it's a subjective thing, because different people are going to prioritize different things. Then, also, I slam the middle pickup basically all the way down on a 3-pickup guitar, because if it's up, it hits my hand.
Okay, so that's more of a player convenience for you than a tonal thing.
Yeah, but even with it slammed all the way down, I don't tend to use it on its own.
Right.
But this is a reverse wound, reverse polarity pickup. So I do like to use it with the neck pickup to cancel out the hum. And even if it's way down like that, it's still going to cancel the hum out. So it does what I want.
Right.
But
you're clever.
It doesn't get in my way. I was playing this thing when it was set up normally, and the pickup was up higher, and it drove me crazy because it was always hitting my hand.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. So, you know, your manufacturer's guidelines are probably a good starting point, and then you can adjust to their using your ears.
And, of course, there is no end of people telling you the right way to do this online. You're going to find a hell of a lot of advice on all of this stuff, and everybody that knows exactly what to do. And, of course, what they're saying is they know what works for them, just like Poedy's saying. Like, there's very few things here that are not subjective, honestly, and it's about what you feel comfortable with, what gives you the sound that you want. Feel free to play. As you've seen, a lot of the things, even the intonation, the pickup height, the truss rod, things like that, even if you do it and you get it to a point where you don't like it, it's easy enough to put it back to to where you had it before, or to try a third position. It's okay. You're not going to break a lot of things doing any of this stuff. Like, routing the holes for the tuners in real time, as we did 2 weeks ago. Yes, that's something that you can do wrong in a real big way. This and setup in general is stuff that you can learn, and I would encourage you to try and experiment. Go slow, go simple. There are lots of books out there. There are videos in addition to this video, and again, you can always ask questions.
We're trying to cover a lot in a pretty compressed period of time. But to me, playing music is just all about the way you interact with the instrument. So what's right for one person isn't what's right for another, because we all relate to the instrument in a different way.
It takes different strokes to move the world.
That's right.
I think that's a pretty good place to stop, because we've gotten into sitcom themes. My name's Dan Amrich, and do you want to actually prove that it plays?
Yeah, I wanted to have Shu come up and play.
Oh yeah,
but
where's
we
Shu?
don't.
If you have more questions, and you very well may, or if you've asked a question and you're bummed that it didn't get asked, it didn't get handled on the air, please do check out the forums at rocksmith.com. It's the little chat bubble at the top of our website, and that's where we're going to be handling the additional answers. We'll go into more detail. If you have any follow-up questions, Poedy will be checking that thread. I'll try and step in. I mean, he's the expert, but I know I know enough to be dangerous and maybe take some of those detailed questions off your plate.
At least one of your answers got attributed to me. So.
Oh, well, that's great.
Thank you.
Do
more work for me.
I'm honored. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Poedy, for taking people don't understand how much all those videos.
Right. So that
you put a lot of work into this.
That 11-minute video at the start, that was 4 hours of my life.
Right.
That got condensed down to 11 minutes.
And that doesn't count the time that you spent editing it.
Right.
Either. Yeah. So thank you so much for going into so much detail. I know this probably seems like it's crazy hyper compressed. We got maybe 3.5 hours, so almost 4 hours of video for everything from completely reassembling a guitar to upgrading some of its key components, all the way through how to dial it in and make it feel right for you as a player. But I really appreciate this. I think this has legs. I think people will be able to look back on this later for reference. So thank you so much for your time and expertise.
Yeah, thank you for
doing this.
For letting me run with my crazy ideas.
And buying you files and stuff. Yeah.
Well, I've got my own at home.
I know, but now we have them here. So now you're fated to fixing all the guitars in the office forever. Thank you so much for doing that too. My name's Dan Amrich. I'm your community developer, and this has been Rocksmith Encore. We will be back on Thursday with our standard stream, where we're going to play this week's DLC. That's the Rockin' Covers Pack. If you haven't heard, it's songs you know, maybe in forms that you don't from other artists. We're really excited about this one, and people seem to be getting into it. But if you want to re-watch this or watch the entire Rocksmith Encore series, you can just check out twitch.tv. There's an archive and there's a playlist for specifically Encore videos. Again, we're happy to answer follow-up questions at rocksmith.com in our forums. And we'll be back again if you have ideas for future Encore things. We have done the history, the anatomy of metal, the history of sound and physics of why music sounds the way it does. We did this. Sort of like we're wide open to ideas. If there's things you'd like to learn or things you want us to discuss more, let us know. Do that also at rocksmith.com. That's super helpful. So thanks, Poedy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Travis. Say goodbye, Travis.
Goodbye, Travis.
Goodbye, Travis.
All right, and thank you very much to Honeypot01 and UB Vertigo. Hopefully you guys got some of those free codes that UB Vertigo was giving out throughout the hour. We'll have more free codes on Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. UTC, right back here on twitch.tv/rocksmithgame. Please do join us. We always love hanging out with you guys, and it's always a lot of fun. So we'll see you in 3 days. Bye, everybody.